So let's move on to our next presentation. Now we'll hear from Drs. Alan Heinemann and Linda Ehrlich-Jones from the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. Alan Heinemann is a professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine and is the director of the Center for Rehabilitation Outcomes Research. Linda Ehrlich-Jones is a research associate professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine and is the assistant director for the Center for Rehabilitation Outcomes Research. In 2012, Drs. Heinemann, Ehrlich-Jones, Jennifer Moore, and Jason Rad received the NARTEX Knowledge Translation Activity Award for the contributions of the Rehabilitation Measures database. And today we'll hear more about the database. Dr. Heinemann, are you ready to begin?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you to AAR and to the Knowledge Translation for Disability and Rehabilitation Research Center for the invitation to participate in this webinar. It's an honor to be included. We were very surprised that we received the award from NARTEC 5 years ago, and boy, how those 5 years have flown. By way of background, this knowledge translation resource was initially funded by NIDLR as part of a Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on improving measurement of rehabilitation outcomes. I want to give full credit to Trudy Mallinson, who was the inspiration for this project. She became aware that Jennifer Moore, who I believe is on the call today, was leading efforts at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago to develop for allied health and nursing clinicians internally a repository of standardized assessment instruments, descriptions of them. They completed systematic reviews and identified best of breed that would help guide rehabilitation practice. Trudy became aware of that resource, thought it was something that the field would benefit from more broadly, and the rest is history. We developed the database as part of that, now completed our RTC, but its legacy lives on. Thanks to the generosity of the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. That's what RAC is now known as once we moved to our new facility about 8 years ago. And we've moved to a new website as of 1 week ago.
Excuse me, Dr. Heinemann. It sounds like we're getting a little background noise coming from your computer. Could you make sure that your computer speakers are off and that your maybe your cell phones might be on as well? So if you could turn those off or on airplane mode.
I have the speakers muted, and I will put my cell phone on to airplane mode.
Thank you.
We do have a couple of microphones adjacent to the projector we're using so that we can see the presentation. If the problem continues after I go on to airplane mode, which I've done right now, we may need to turn off the projector if that problem persists. Does it?
I can't hear it right now. I'm waiting for our tech folks to let me know. No, we're not hearing it now, so I think we're good to go.
Okay. We also moved another microphone away from the projector, so hopefully that will help.
Great. Pardon that.
Great. The inspiration for the project was recognized by Jennifer Moore and her colleagues, who realized that having a freely available searchable web-based database of outcome measures would be helpful for clinicians when they wanted to select appropriate instruments for screening, to monitor patient progress, and to assess the outcomes in rehabilitation care. Our primary focus was inpatient rehabilitation, but subsequently the outpatient day rehabilitation applications of these instruments is also pretty evident. The RMD helps clinicians by providing concise descriptions of instruments, how to use them at the point of care with patients. The goal is to help clinicians implement and modify a plan of care and ultimately improve their patients' outcomes by being able to monitor their outcomes closely. There's a large and growing literature on the clinical utilization of standardized instruments in rehabilitation. Here are a sample of articles, some by Diane Jetty, Garland, and others, documenting the infrequent rate at which, in the case of physical therapists not using standardized assessments, the issues, also a problem with mental health practitioners. As Garland documents, often use their intuition more often than standardized assessments in monitoring patients' progress. The same is true in medical specialties such as oncology, as well as in nursing. So we have company with other disciplines, other specialties not relying on standardized assessments. Frequently, clinicians are using experience to monitor progress. The problems with that is that it can lead to inaccurate identification of when patients plateau and when it's time to be discharged from therapy, and limits achievement of maximal patient outcomes. A bit of background here. Again, Diane Jetty has contributed to this, as well as Schreiber and others. Much of this focuses on physical therapy practice because APTA has been a real leader in promoting use of standardized assessments. For example, 93% agree that understanding research evidence is essential for providing patient care, and 80% indicate they value research contributions. 80% agree that empirical evidence improves the quality of care and assists with clinical decision making. And overall, they understand that they're expected to incorporate research evidence into clinical decision-making assessments and treatments that they provide to patients. There are multiple benefits to integrating standardized assessments into routine care. They're recommended for use in various clinical guidelines. Pretty clear evidence that implementing standardized assessments leads to improved patient outcomes as well as satisfaction. Clearly assists in clinical decision-making by helping to determine whether treatment plans are appropriate, identifying whether patients are making meaningful progress, and determining whether a patient is at risk for adverse outcomes such as falls, impairment levels that don't improve, and reduced prognosis. Also helps with clarifying diagnoses and when referrals are appropriate. I think fundamentally a benefit is that patients like to see their outcomes when it can be graphed, when it can be put in numerical terms. That complements the I'm doing better, but I can't see the results in a very consistent manner. Certainly as a physical therapy patient myself, and having returned several times for shoulder and low back issues, when I'm asked to demonstrate range of motion or manual muscle testing is completed, I'm left wondering, how on earth are they quantifying and how reliable are those numbers? And I would have appreciated a bit more specific quantification. Well, if standardized assessments are so good, how come they aren't used more often? The number of barriers that we attempted to address by development of the Rehabilitation Measures database. Primary amongst those barriers is clinician-limited access to research. Not everyone works at a university setting or a larger hospital where access to PubMed and other online resources is accessible. The curriculum that many clinicians have completed doesn't include thorough training on how to read and critique articles describing development of standardized assessments or treatment trials. Probably the biggest constraint has to do with time. Patients are expected to bill for services, expected to provide direct services, and digging through the literature, synthesizing it is prohibitively time-consuming. So a resource that does that homework for them would seem to be a great benefit. A number of ways to overcome these barriers have been described in the literature. It's noted by these citations. We'll provide the references at the end of the lecture today. Providing research that's summarized in an understandable manner. It was a recommendation from more than 20 years ago. summarizing research evidence concisely for clinicians, Diane Jetty recommendation from more than 10 years ago, and providing online resources that are accessible, available at the point of care that are not behind a cash barrier point, also recommended. Well, we were guided by those considerations as we started to develop the Rehabilitation Measures database. We organized focus groups to get input on what people wanted to see in such a resource. We included the usual suspects in medical rehabilitation, PTs, OTs, speech-language pathologists, psychologists, and nurses, amongst others. What they told us is that they wanted psychometric information that would help guide service delivery. So that meant knowing information about reliability and validity, normative values, indices of change related to sensitivity, whether there are any ceiling and floor effects, and what the clinical utility of the instruments are. They wanted information about how to administer the tests, how to score and interpret them, and if at all possible, access to the actual test or score form, or if it was proprietary, a link so that they could acquire it. Hits to the Rehabilitation Measures database continues to grow. We have over 100,000 monthly site visits. Users live all around the world, and with the move to the new website last week, we now have more than 400 instrument summaries that are available to users. Our mission in delivering information to clinicians now is to facilitate evidence-based practice throughout the world. We will do that by providing clinicians with high quality and concise instrument information that will assist in identifying the best instruments that can allow them to assess and monitor patients who undergo rehabilitation that addresses physical and cognitive issues. Collaborators play a critical role in this resource. We've engaged faculty and students in a number of rehabilitation science and nursing programs. Faculty use writing instrument summaries as class projects. They're often very collaborative in nature. Students are invited to develop and update instrument summaries. Faculty serve as mentors. It provides an opportunity to learn psychometric terminology, to gain skills in literature reviews, and how to analyze them. Several collaborators have gone on to publish systematic reviews and meta-analyses of instruments, as well as taking advantage of the opportunities to provide brief summaries in several journals. Students also gain visibility professionally in so doing. They can have a publication that they can cite and include in their resume. Linda, have I veered into your content here? No, she's signaling. I can just keep right on rolling here, but I got one more slide. Okay. This slide lists the programs with which we collaborate at the University of Illinois at Chicago, just down the street. We're involved with PT and OT graduate programs at the University of Indianapolis, thanks to Jenny Moore's connections, as well as Duke University, where PT collaborators are based. University of North Carolina, DePaul University in Chicago has a nursing program that works with us. SUNY Buffalo in rehabilitation counseling. George Washington University, occupational therapy, where Trudy Mallinson is now based, and the University of North Texas, we engage physical therapists faculty.
Hi. So thank you, Alan. I'll continue on talking about our professional organization collaborators. So we've had association with the American Physical Therapy Association, the Evaluation Database to Guide Effectiveness, or EDGE groups. We've worked with the neurology group, the vestibular group, Parkinson's disease, the multiple sclerosis, the stroke, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and PT Now. We've also worked with the American Occupational Therapy Association and the American Congress of Rehabilitation Medicine. As part of the measurement networking group, we've developed an RMD task force, which that group, we just met last week in Atlanta, and we'll be having them to help us with our work as we go forward. As Alan briefly mentioned, we do have collaborations with 3 specific journals: the Archives of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, Rehabilitation Psychology, and the American Journal of Occupational Therapy. For the Archives and Rehabilitation Psychology, we have what we call a tearsheet, meaning that it could be something that the clinician could actually tear out of the journal and take with them to their clinical site and use that information there. The front page of that tear sheet is a brief abstract of what the instrument is about, including one particular patient population. The second page contains the psychometric information and the administration information and any other information that might be of help to the person using that instrument. The American Journal of Occupational Therapy, as well as the Rehabilitation Nursing Journal, we've developed a little bit different type of tear sheet. It's actually 4 pages in length, and it contains a case study. So the most recent one that we have for American Journal of Occupational Therapy is on the My Vocational Situation instrument, and it contains a case study and goes through the use of that particular instrument, and then also talks about the interpretation of the results of that instrument. We were going to do a little bit of a demonstration, but it was a little bit on edge as to what would happen since we hadn't actually gone on to our new site until about Wednesday evening, late into the night. But this is the new site that you will need to go to. Currently, if you go to rehabmeasures.org, you will be automatically redirected to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab website. We have some screenshots here, and we did create a couple of videos, and we will be putting them on the actual database website, so you'll be able to go through them for those of you who aren't familiar with how to use our website. But this is the site that will come up when you go to the URL that we just gave, the Rehabilitation Measures Database. You would click on the top bar where it says Research, and it would take you down to the bottom of the page where you would actually hit on searching the Rehabilitation Measures Database. If you know the instrument that you're interested in looking for, you would put that in that search bar that is listed there. And for purposes of this demonstration, we'll say the Berg Balance Scale, and then you hit the little magnifying glass. If you happen to know that you don't know the instrument, but you happen to know which particular population you're interested in, you could actually click on one of these populations that could take you to the search feature as well. So when you get to the actual instrument, there's several things that you want to note here. There is the one bar in there that says Instrument Details, and that's where you'll find either a link to an instrument or we'll actually find a PDF of the instrument if that's available for us to give to you. You can actually scroll down and see the different psychometrics underneath here on this particular instrument. And if you want to save this, there is a way that you can have your own personal dashboard, and you can see that there is a link there for you to save. We haven't lost any of the important information that we had on the old website, so we still have the statistical terms and their use. So in particular for students that are working with us, we do have the information there that talks about the different definitions of reliability, validity, etc. So that is still available. In addition, there's information about the people that have contributed to the Rehab Measures database. In addition, there is also a link to our educational resources that we had on the old website. So these were videos that are available to use in your classroom that talks about the different aspects of psychometric properties. And that's where we will put our additional videos about using the new website. This is just a graphic of the Google Analytics, so we can keep track of all of the hits that we get on this website. This happened to be over the life of the website. So as you can see, 303,683 in terms of sessions. So we've had quite a few people come to visit us at this site. We did want to highlight the funding that has become available to help with creating this website and keeping this website maintained. As Alan mentioned originally, that this was funded by the National Institutes on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research through a Rehabilitation Research and Training Center that focused primarily on the populations of stroke, spinal cord injury, and traumatic brain injury. Since that initial funding, we received additional funding from the Retirement Research Foundation that Jenny Moore helped us with. And this was to highlight different areas that were important to the older adult. So things such as osteoarthritis, cognitive impairments, cardiopulmonary disease, Parkinson's disease, urinary incontinence, balance deficits, and falls. In addition, we received some funding from the Paralyzed Veterans of America Educational Foundation, which allowed us to add instruments that were psychosocial related to spinal cord injury. We were also able to add more instruments related to occupational therapy and nursing by way of that grant. Our future directions. Most importantly, as I mentioned, we do have a task force now that's part of the American Congress on Rehabilitation Medicine Measurement Networking Group, for which anyone can participate. It's an opportunity to help shape what the RMD is going to look like in the future. We've made some changes in the way that it's presented on the new website, but we're always looking for more information and more help from our users as to what would make using the site easier. We're also looking for additional academic and professional collaborators. So for those of you involved in professional or academic universities that we would be interested in using the RMD as an assignment for a research or statistical course, to please let us know. And we're always looking for additional collaborators for us to publish the journal Tearsheets. Currently, there are 42 Tearsheets that are available through Archives, Rehabilitation Psychology, and the American Occupational Therapy Journal. But we're certainly always looking for more opportunities. These are the references that Alan alluded to earlier in our presentation. And we certainly want to acknowledge, again, our funding sources, and also to acknowledge our Rehabilitation Measures team, Alan, myself, Allison Pipert, and Edith Engel.
Excellent. Thank you so much for giving us this presentation on the Rehabilitation Database. It's exciting to see all the work that you've done and you continue to do with it. We have one question that's popped up, and I want to encourage other participants to ask their questions in the chat box. The first question from Lisa is there a methodological quality appraisal, like, for instance, the risk of bias process for measurement property evidence included in the RMD?
This is a topic of some discussion last Thursday morning during the RMD Task Force meeting, during the ACRM meeting. There is one that's very suitable called COSMIN, C-O-S-M-I-N. It's developed by a Dutch group that is very comprehensive. Because of its comprehensiveness, it's very burdensome and labor-intensive to complete. I'm sort of teetering on the edge of saying we ought to require use of those guidelines routinely. However, we're a little concerned about the burden that it would place on the students and faculty who are completing them. The reviews do undergo several levels of scrutiny. The faculty who review the assignments certainly are reviewing it and critiquing it and grading it before we receive them. We do fact-checking, compare the numbers compiled for reliability, validity, MCIDs, MCDs, and the like to make sure they match up with the original source. We're limited in our resources in terms of how much interpretive fact-checking that we can do. That's why additional volunteers are so critical. The hospital has generously funded part of a staff member to help with coordinating the collaborative opportunities, but we really do run on volunteer labor. We have received feedback on occasion about accuracy of some information. We've made some corrections or clarified information on rare occasion as a result of user feedback.
Excellent. It sounds like you have a good process in place. We have a second question that's come up. First, let me scroll up a little bit. I can't see it. Catherine says, congratulations and thank you for all your work on this great site. Wondering if you have looked at the usage data at all in terms of what measures, topics, etc. that users are searching. She can see lots of fascinating opportunities from that. And also, the second part of the question is, have you evaluated the impact of the site on practice behaviors, or do you have any plans to?
In terms of instrument usage, we've done a couple of things. We can look at hits to individual pages within RMD. My recollection is that the functional independence measure, the FIM, is at the top of the list. To the former website, people often would get there directly. They would just search for the FIM, and the search results would include the RMD entry, and they would then click through on us and appear as an outside visitor. So we do have that information. We didn't present it today. In terms of, we've also done a couple of surveys in terms of clinician usage of the information. Former project manager Jason Rad, who's completing a postdoctoral fellowship now at the University of Michigan with Noel Carlozzi, is on the old site received several hundred respondents to a survey. He has not had a chance to analyze that yet, but it's he collected data through the transition point last week. We have done a survey earlier of users. Linda, my memory's a little fuzzy. We've not submitted that for publication. We've looked at the kinds of users, the purpose for which they're searching, the populations they serve, and the like. That's something we hope to write up. In terms of the issue of how is this benefiting practice, I certainly hope it has, but we've not undertaken an assessment of that. It's certainly a nice opportunity, and we welcome the opportunity to work with anyone on the call today who'd have an interest in that.
It looks like someone is asking about the training for the students when they're involved in writing summaries. So for students as well as anyone else who would be interested in writing a summary for the Rehabilitation Measures database, we do have an author toolkit. I'm just proofing it right now. And we've gone to making it look like what the new website looks like, so we're trying to get that all together. But that toolkit basically explains how it is that the information needs to be gathered in order to be then put into the website. In the future, we also will be able to have a website available for each of our collaborators so that they will have a specific username and password. So a faculty member, hopefully who has a teaching assistant, will be able to enter the students' information directly into the website, and then we will go through our processes of reviewing the information, making sure all the facts are correct before it then will get sent on to being published onto the website.
I see there's several other comments. Jenny Moore comments. We've also looked at traffic to specific summaries provided by the APTA EDGE groups. These groups use the information in their publications as well. I see Kathleen Murphy asks, is there anything in the site that describes recommendations? Yes, those instruments reviewed by the APTA EDGE groups do include a recommendation. Typically, they're fairly strong. We do not have summaries of instruments that have weak psychometric property, so it's sort of a choice between good and best kinds of instruments, depending upon the application.
And it seems that Kathleen also was asking whether there needs to have some kind of requirement or about a certain level of expertise on the part of the administrator of the instrument. So we do have a training section on the website on each of the instruments. We actually are going to be expanding that area to give more information about what kinds of training and whatnot are needed. But if there is at this particular time information about what needs to be done for that person to use that instrument, it should be available there.
Great, thank you so much. A little further up, we had a question from Nikki that says, are there tech row on the website, like pedometers, accelerometers, and they are increasingly used in both practice and research?
Well, a variety of different applications one could make of those devices. No, we do not have technology, solo technology kinds of applications. If one were using some sort of accelerometer to assist with measuring timed up and go or other gait tests, you could certainly supplement the tests with more precise measurements, but that's not a focus of this database.
Thank you.
Some of the instruments are administered online, but nothing as was mentioned in terms of accelerometers or pedometers.
Excellent. Catherine notes, looking forward to seeing the data and those publications come out, critical for advancing our understanding of these KT interventions and impact on practice.
We agree. We'd be happy to collaborate with anyone for whom this could be a professional publication. If any students are interested in an evaluation, we'd be glad to collaborate with them.
Excellent. The call is out. So Joanne asks if some of those technologies might be available on ABLE data. Do you have any insights about that?
Such as the instrumented tests that the other webinar viewer asked about?
I believe so. I think she's clarifying right now.
It's possible they're on ABLE data. It's a distinct area of information from what we provide.
Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah, she was talking about like the pedometers and things like that. And another question that came in during our registration that for your presentation was once you have identified a system or organizational barriers like a change organizational priorities or changing in funding, what are some successful strategies to address these barriers or changes? So with the RMD, was it difficult to, or how did you address the barriers to changing over to a new website, for instance?
Well, the truth is we were originally planning to launch the new website in January. We were initially told the consultant would be transforming the data from the old site to the new website, and then the resources to do that did not materialize, and we were left doing it on our own on an ad hoc basis. We're very careful in transferring the information to the new website, proofreading it, at the same time adding additional content, which there's no point in putting it on the old site because that was going to go away. There were also a number of that work was mostly done, I think, by June. We had a number of formatting challenges, which in terms of readability and font size and the like, and display of information that took a bit longer to resolve. The delightful thing about the new site is it can be viewed on any platform. It recognizes whether you're on a smartphone or a tablet or a desktop computer, adjusts the display accordingly. The search function is very much improved. We're tagging instruments, have the capacity to do that, so they appear in search functions, searches appropriately. But we don't have, because it's templated throughout the larger website, it's difficult to make changes just within this subdomain. So we've had to work with others in the organization and the consultant to make those fixes. And we weren't always the highest priority. So at long last, we're delighted that October the 25th, we finally were able to launch the new site. It was expensive. There were a lot of consulting time that went into planning, designing, implementing this. Just a little bit of off-topic background. We looked at a number of mechanisms to make the website self-supporting. We're very appreciative to the Treat Center at the University of New Hampshire, I believe, that had an R24 funding from NIH to help rehabilitation investigators commercialize their products. They walked us through a business development plan. That was all very helpful, but in the end, the funding sources were very limited, so we're very thankful to our employer that they welcomed the opportunity to bring the website into the larger hospital fold.
It's a wonderful looking website, so it does seem like a lot of work went into getting that up. Kathleen asked, how many months and years did it take to remount the database?
So a little bit less than a year, probably 8 or 9 months. And in addition, we did have some volunteers. We actually routinely have volunteers that work with us. Many of them are students. Many of them have done a summary as part of a class assignment and have interest in continuing with that. So we've had a couple of graduate students. We've even had an undergraduate student that was interested in doing this kind of work in terms of the psychometrics. But in terms of transferring the data, we had about, I think, 4 or 5 people at the same time working on it. So we had multiple double checks and triple checks to make sure that all pieces of the old website were correctly transferred. They were a very hardworking group.
Yeah, Kathleen says, and I agree, that's a tremendous effort to get all of that up to speed. So, it looks like those are all the questions that we have. We're a little bit early for our scheduled break, but we can go ahead and do that. Thank you so much, Drs. Heinemann and Dr. Ehrlich-Jones. We really appreciate your time in presenting on the rehabilitation database. And so to all the folks that are in the Adobe Connect room, we'll be taking a break until 25 after the hour. So thank you so much, and join us back at 25 past.